Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. We're excited to announce that registration for our fall cohort of the Next Economy MBA is officially open. Beginning September 22nd, this 9-month facilitated learning journey was created for listeners like you, the entrepreneurs, artists, community leaders, and other folks on the front lines of the Next Economy movement. Based on our 15 years of experience working with over 350 different social enterprises, we'll explore the pitfalls of the business-as-usual economy and dive into key business principles from a regenerative and equity-centered lens, all while fostering the community and connection we need to stay resilient, inspired, and motivated in our movement to create a world that works for all of us. Interested in learning more? Join us for a free intro session where you can meet course facilitators and hear from our amazing alumni to determine if this course is a fit for you. Plus, save 20% on tuition when you register before August 3rd during our early bird sale. Get started at lifteconomy.com/MBA. Thanks for listening. And now on to the show.
Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Hello, my name is Erin Axelrod, a partner and worker owner at Lift Economy, and my guest today is Wendy Johnson. Wendy is a regenerative organic farmer and grazer in northern Iowa, where she operates Jóia Food and Fiber Farm and co-manages 1,000 acres of conventional corn and soybeans with her dad. She is a writer and public speaker focused on the intersections of climate and agriculture through the lens of her own experiences living and working in both agriculture worlds and advocating for better federal ag policy and increased support for regenerative farms and farmers growing food, fiber, and energy. Wendy, such warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
I am so excited to have you. It's not every day that we get to talk to someone who is actually doing the hard work day in, day out with the animals, with the land, but also you have a very diverse background. So I'd love for you to share just your pathway into this work and how you kind of transitioned your career into being a full-time producer.
Well, a little bit of background. I grew up on a farm here in Iowa, just actually a few miles from where I live today, and grew up on a hog farm as well as a corn soybean farm, and didn't really realize where my food came from until I moved to Los Angeles, California, which is where I went to pursue a career in fashion there. And it's an interesting place to discover food, but farmers markets were and are a really wonderful place to get the sights and the smells and the tangible, you can touch things of food, and people are caring about food and talking about food. So the very place that I grew up in, which is a very large food production area, there was just such a separation. I think back on that a lot because there's such a separation between kind of this like really global style, commodity style agriculture that really lifts people away from really understanding where their food and fiber is coming from. So yeah, I moved to a really large city that one would think there's a lot of separation between people knowing where their food is coming from, but I was somehow able to discover it there. And with that brought me to a place like Brazil, is where I lived for 3 years. And it really hit me there of how people come together around food and celebrate together around food and build community around food. And things are just slower there. There's time to eat. It's not like, in the US, we're rushing around and eating while we're driving, and they actually take time. In other countries, they take time to spend around food, and it's cultural. And I had this better understanding, I guess, of what food meant to me and how my upbringing, I came from a place that is a very commoditized agricultural place, and that I could see myself there. I could see myself with all these kind of world experiences that I had, bring it back to a place that is so far removed from that. And I knew that I had a lot of challenges ahead of me. I consider Iowa like a ground zero point, in terms of not only the change in our ecosystem. We have probably the biggest ecosystem change going from prairie and oak savanna to commoditized corn and soybeans, but also just bringing food back to the local place and celebrating food and building community around food. And when I did move back in 2010, it was very sparse to find local food. But really I've been here for 15 years now, it has grown substantially and people have become more connected. COVID was a huge turning point for a lot of people. But even prior to that, there were more and more farmers having these direct-to-consumer, direct market farms, not only with vegetables, but, animal proteins and flowers and agriculture. The culture was coming back to agriculture. And it's been really an exciting time to be a farmer because I felt there was not a place or a space for me growing up in a really commoditized and more global growing agriculture. So it's been a great ride. Challenging, but great.
No doubt, no doubt. Could you share a little bit about when you were working in fashion? Did you learn about how fashion also is connected to agriculture? You're also producing fiber, so I'd just love to hear a little bit of a glimpse of that story too.
Yeah, so I learned a lot about fiber in Los Angeles as well because my focus was in the denim industry. So where cotton, as you know, comes from mostly India, but all over the world. The U.S. produces some cotton. But what goes into producing cotton is extraordinary, not in a good way, and not in a positive way. A lot of extraction, not just only environmentally, but
humans,
socially.
Yeah.
And the labor that goes into cotton production. And, we have a checkered, obviously in the U.S., we have a very dark past of our own with cotton production. It really was an eye-opener because this was in the early 2000s when high-end denim was becoming a thing. People are buying denim at $300 to $400, for a pair of jeans with at that time, at least in the beginnings, with no real connection to the labor costs and the environmental costs of that cotton. And so I think it was, as I was kind of before I moved to Brazil, I was kind of moving out of the fashion world a bit just because of the extractiveness and the labor, the things were not fair in that industry. And there were just starting to become some denim companies that were looking at more sustainable cotton and recycling denim for their products. And I think that's great. Hemp was coming on as a fiber, but the majority of our fiber in the US is imported. When we were a large hemp producer during World War II, we can grow flax like craziness, but a lot of it is imported. And so I think the fiber world, we have a lot, just like the food in the United States has really changed a little bit in terms of how people are looking at how it's grown and where it's grown and how it's raised. I think fiber has a little bit further to go, but food is kind of segued, fiber into people gaining awareness around fast fashion and fair labor and environmental impacts of what they're wearing today. So yeah, I think fiber, I wanted to talk about fiber today, so I'm glad you brought it up, but it's really an exciting time. Fiber shed is a thing. It started in San Francisco Bay Area and it has moved to all these different fiber sheds across the United States. I belong to a fiber shed here. It's called Three Rivers Fiber Shed. I'm a wool producer, so I think wool is one of the most fascinating and wonderful fibers we as humans could be blessed to wear and to sleep in. And it just has so many benefits, and it's completely regenerative and does not harm the animal in any way. And we just need more infrastructure and capital to move towards fiber production here in the United States instead of importing a lot that have questionable labor practices. So I'm excited about that world.
We very much have in common a obsession with wool. I just learned to drop spindle and produce yarn from my own roving that we produce in a small scale flock. But it is no small feat to take on one of those two domains, food or fiber, and you're doing both. So thank you. And I'd love for you to share a little bit with our listeners about your day. What is it that you farm? What are the products that come off your farm? And how does the farm look? Can you bring the listeners in a little bit to how they would feel walking onto a day at Jóia Farm?
Yeah, I was just talking with someone yesterday about this was my day yesterday. It's like the weather. It's like the weather is ins and outs and ups and downs. And as farmers, we deal with climate change and we're right in it. We went from 90 degrees the other day down to 40 degrees, which isn't great for plants or animals. It's really hard on everybody, even humans. And we're working in it all the time, every day, these fluctuations. A week ago, I felt like we were in high desert winds, like we were in Bakersfield, California, but we were in Iowa. I mean, dust just everywhere from topsoil blowing around, exfoliating your face and skin. These are harsher and harsher conditions that farmers are working in all across the globe. But a place where we once felt sort of cushioned in Iowa we're now seeing in the last decade a lot of environmental impacts due to our practices and such. So every day can be different. It's all depending on the weather and what it brings today. Today, for example, it's like 60 degrees. I think in a few days it's going to turn to 90. So we need to be ready for some of this kind of early heat that is not normal for our area. But if someone were to walk onto our farm today, and we do give tours, we love to give people tours of our farm because we're sort of an island in a very corn and soy dominated area. So all around us is corn, and we're this kind of little green island, 130 acres of regeneration. And you walk onto our farm, and the first thing I think you would notice and hear is the sounds. So it's like a buzzing highway of insects and birds. And we were formerly grasslands. So millennia old habits of grassland birds still come here, but there are less and less habitats for them to come and nest here. And then they migrate back to South America and Central America. But I've seen birds that I had never seen before growing up. And so you would see a lot of bird sightings, bobolinks, and dickcissels, and meadowlarks. And I just saw indigo buntings yesterday. And there's a lot more orioles and just goldfinches, just lots of different birds, which I think is a really good sign of regeneration and life in general, because the insects have to be here for the birds to want to be here, and the seeds and all that. We're also lambing and calving, so we have lots of baby animals on the farm right now. We use regenerative grazing, so we're moving our animals every day around on all of our perennial pastures. We are 100% perennial, so that means we don't have a lot of annual crops like corn or soybeans or some annual small grains. We do, once in a while, we grow oats. Like this year, we have some organic oats, but it's always dual cropped. So we'll have a small grain, like an organic small grain, paired with a perennial. So it's seeded together. So after the oats come off, we have perennial growth underneath that comes through, and then we'll be able to graze those areas for 3 or 4 years or so. And we're always planting trees. We planted over 6,000 trees and shrubs in an area that historically most people are removing their trees to make more tillable acres. And we're adding trees in areas that are probably historically had trees, like in riparian buffers, places that had more water, needs more stream bank stabilization. And we've added trees for shade for some of our livestock by addition, not by subtraction. We don't have a lot of forests in our area. But with the trees and the grasslands, we grow a crop called kernza. It's a perennial grain crop, which has been fascinating to be a part of this growing kind of ecosystem of perennial grain crops. It is a wonderful bird habitat, as well as a delicious grain, as well as it's perennial, and it can be grazed. And so it has this multifunctionality of a perennial crop, which I'm really excited about for the future of agriculture, perennial agriculture specifically, is perennial grain crops. Thinking about perennial cereal rye and perennial wheat and perennial oats and perennial barley. And as we think about all the different kinds of grain crops we have, thinking about them in terms of perennials versus annuals is an exciting place to be.
We haven't had him on the podcast, but Eric Tonesmeyer is a close ally, and he produced a report that's free for anyone to download, documenting all these trees with edible leaves that folks can grow to solve two crises at the same time: the climate crisis and the global nutrient deficiency crisis, which is not... The interesting thing about the nutrient deficiency crisis is it's not unique to affluent world or non-affluent world. Both non-affluent world and affluent world populations are dealing with nutrient deficiencies because, affluent world populations were just eating empty calories, and of course the nutrient crisis in non-affluent populations. But talk a little bit more about the funding, because you're planting trees, you're doing all these things that a conventional farmer, and you also are, I would love to talk a little bit about the plan to transition the 1,000 acres, but talk about a conventional farmer would say, well, we can't afford to do that. We can't afford to plant trees. Who's paying for that? And you've been really creative around, you've partnered with Mad Agriculture. You probably, I'm imagining you've gotten some NRCS or RCD funding to do riparian corridor planting. Yeah, just share anything you would share around how your company stays afloat.
Yeah, that's a huge question. I think that could be a podcast session all to itself, is regenerative funding and capital. In general, I've had to be very creative. Creative because traditional banks are not supportive of, and rightly so, they're a business too, but they haven't been supportive only because maybe they don't have the knowledge around agriculture that thinks more perennially or long-term. Traditional banks think on short-term, year after, 1 year cycles. And that's paired very well with the commodity system of annual crops and annual cropping systems. In addition, it has the Farm Bill and the ag policy support that supports that financial, gives it that insurance that a farmer is going to get some sort of income. Even if at a loss, if they have a loss that year, they're going to get some income. So then it gives those traditional banks that security, insurance that they're going to get paid back year after year. So it's harder, for them to think longer term. And so as we're thinking about organic rotations, organic systems, where we're using biological weed control, using perennials, for example, over chemical, and we're using mechanical weed control over chemical, those sometimes crop rotations is mind-boggling to most traditional bankers. So we've had to really partner with organizations and funders that are interested in less chemicals in our food and perennialization and wildlife and conservation. And those are hard to come by, but they do exist. And I think Mad Agriculture has been a forefront runner in transforming capital to start thinking about, hey, these systems are really good for planet Earth. They're really good for humans. We need more of them. How are we going to get capital to them? And bringing funders along on that journey who care. I think we all should care about the future of humanity, right? And the future of our planet, and not think just short-term returns, but instead think from a human perspective. We need clean water. We need food and we need fiber, and we need energy, right? Those are all things we need as humans to exist and survive. And guess what? They're all related to agriculture. They need farmers and land and water to grow and do these things. I've admired Mad Agriculture for taking that leap, and they're creating an environment that other funders can, awareness. So that's been wonderful. Mad Agriculture believed in me, and they believe, I think, in every partner that they connect with their farmers. And that's all that I needed, was a partner. And since then, I've found other ways to be creative as I start to transition either into organic or perennial systems. And NRCS, I'm a huge advocate of conservation activities within the USDA and continuing to advocate for a lot of the programs that are shifting today with policy. And during the Biden-Harris administration, conservation and conservation funding, it was amazing, I have to say. I guess that's the only word I can think of right now, but it was highly supportive of the types of systems that we are trying to implement as perennial farmers, as well as organic farmers. And what we're seeing today is something very opposite of that. And so our advocacy work is sometimes we're feeling a lot on the defense. We're not on the offense, we're on the defense. And we need more and more awareness and help funding wise for, I don't like to use these words, but the soldiers on the ground, those that are defending the progress that we've made so far in terms of conservation work and conservation funding, but also so that we don't have to start back at ground zero again when maybe the political environment does start to shift. And so that's why I really like to really advocate to funders, if they're listening right now, is ag policy and farm bill work. It may sound so boring and it's not sexy and it's not exciting and enticing. It might not provide the returns right away, but long term, it is some of the most instrumental work that is required for us to move forward. This policy is a huge piece of agriculture in every form, in every way, whether we like it or not. And so, I've always had the question, does policy follow the money or does money follow policy? I don't know how the answer to that, but I like to be where I'm at and sharing the story of how powerful and important food and fiber is from the ground, from my personal experiences and from the farmers around me. Now, as it relates to our family farm and the commodity farm that I grew up on, that still is, that is highly related to what's happening in net policy today. And it is the reason, I would say, the reason why farms can't transition and be as nimble is because of how policy is today in terms of the support given to crop insurance, the support given to our farm programs, how those farm programs are written, and the lack of conservation funding and the movement of how conservation funding is moving away from growing trees and the simple biological processes that are what we think about when we think about conservation agriculture is moving away to kind of this AI, precision agriculture tools, and basically moving people away from agriculture and into more machines doing the work, which we can watch any dystopian television show on TV and see what we're creating it ourselves. We're sort of manifesting it with our own imaginations into a more mechanical and mechanized world. But I don't think you can really have really good food, healthy, nutritional food without people. So we need farmers and more farmers to be able to create and grow nutrient-dense food for humanity.
Well said. And we often talk at Lift Economy around how do we use technological advancements to augment or support or make easier the human work of being on the land. Right? Not replace humans on the land, but support it, make that job more enticing, more tenable for more people. And I think you spoke so well to the challenges in the zeitgeist of the time right now, which is moving more and more towards technocentrism and these somewhat naive statements that AI will solve it or robotics will solve our food system constraints. And so I'd love to ask a little bit more detailed question around what are the conversations you're having with your family around the future of that 1,000 acres? Are there pathways that you can imagine, whether it be a different administration or more foundation, or you respond, I have no idea what I would do in your shoes.
Yeah, I'm sure the outsider looks in and say, well, why don't you just transition everything to what you're doing now? It's so easy. And it's not. It is so complex and complicated and very non-economically viable, I should say that, to do that kind of transition because of those things that I talked about earlier about all the support systems for commodity agriculture. And it's not an easy switchover. And what I've been trying to do in this last, decade in building Jóia Food and Fiber Farm is using it as like an incubator of ideas, an incubator of practices. In practice, can a farm like this go from 50 acres to 100 to 130 acres? Can it go to 1,000 acres? What are the needs? Using this as kind of an example and learning, obviously, what it takes to plant 6,000 trees and what it takes to graze 600 mouths and more than that, because there's chickens too. I forgot we graze chickens, but so many mouths to feed using perennial agriculture. And can we be economically viable doing it? We can. We've discovered we can, but we need scale. But to do all of that transition at once is going to take people. It will take probably machines, and it's going to need a combination of that, and it's going to need financing. You can't just flip unless you're very, very wealthy and have no debt. Agriculture, most farms have debt, and because land is very expensive and machines are very expensive and labor is very expensive. So there's all this, we don't have healthcare and health insurance and all these other things that socially are corrupt and wrong with farming as a industry today. But that's another podcast, maybe one day to talk about that. But how can a farm be inviting and enticing? How can agriculture be enticing and inviting for the next generation that wants to do this kind of work when AI is taking over people's jobs and we're becoming more mechanized? It's one of the most earnest opportunities in life, I think, is to grow life, which I don't know if that is important in anyone's lives today, but it is really an eye-opener, and it's tangible, and it's just really beautiful. It's meaningful. It's meaningful work. And I'd love to see more people coming from cities and growing up in cities and coming out and moving to rural America and getting their hands dirty and experiencing life, like experiencing nurturing life, which I think is so powerful. But those are the types of experience. We have an internship program on our farm, and we do get a few people from the city to come out and get their hands dirty and learn what it takes to have a farm, an organic and perennial farm. But we need more. We need more people to be interested in this, and we need those programs to help pay for some of the labor and that as well, but housing and those kinds of things. But that's really what we need to transition what we've grown here and incubated here at Jóia Food and Fiber Farm to this larger commodity farm, transitioning kind of, 100 acres at a time. And maybe it's going to take multiple enterprises, other people growing other types of food, vegetables, mushrooms, eggs, all the different kinds of things that we need. But it feels like, I talked a little bit about the pillars of capital and infrastructure and policy and markets. All those things really need to fall in place for the type of agriculture that we're doing, which is outside of commodity agriculture, to really make a movement to be able to have a larger farms transition to an economically viable business. And we need all those things, maybe not simultaneously, but we need efforts at all of those pieces. I'll give you an example. So I grow a grain called kernza. Not a lot of people have heard about kernza, but it's this amazing perennial grain. It tastes wonderful. It's kind of a sweet, nutty flavor. But the infrastructure, where do I take the kernza to get milled? Where do I take it to get dehulled and cleaned? Now, I have to go 2.5 hours south of me to the small, cleaner dehuller. Then I have to drive that myself, transport it, that grain by tote, all the way to Minneapolis to get milled and bagged, and then find a distributor to distribute it to food co-ops. That shouldn't be a farmer's job, right? I should just be able, just like a commodity farmer, I should be able to take it to my local elevator. They're the ones that are selling it, distributing it to distributors who want it, getting it cleaned and everything. I should just be able to produce and bring it to my local place that distributes, cleans, aggregates, and move it out into the region. But that's not how things are set up. And so it's those kinds of systems, when I talk about infrastructure and supply chain, that are lacking. And obviously this is in fiber as well.
I was just going to say, we could talk about wool.
Yeah, I have a lot of wool. I have 2 years worth of wool that's waiting to get cleaned. My woolen mill is 3.5 hours away. They're 2 years behind in terms of the wool that they're trying to process. And they're working with equipment that is probably 100 years old. The technology for fiber processing, it's just not there. There's no R&D. They're working with systems that are ancient. And so you'd think with today's technology, there could be some adaptations to increase productivity and efficiency of those systems, but there's not. And so that's where I think there's a lot more research and funding that needs to go into that research to help with some of those fiber businesses. And can fiber in the US be a viable economy? I think it can be, but there hasn't really been a focus on fiber yet. So I don't know if I helped to answer that question, but it is a big project. It is something that I'm wanting to transition, and I'm starting to transition more and more acres to perennial. So we started with another 40 acres of transitioning to organic, using perennial agriculture. We're starting using grazing. We're adding fencing. We've already integrated some of the basic regenerative practices like no-till and cover crops and grazing livestock. But we need more. We need additional crops in a rotation. We need to use less fossil fuel derived fertilizers, use less to no chemicals, and all of these things, adding livestock, crop rotations, more crops than just corn and soybeans, but small grains and perennials, those all add to that system of reducing fossil fuel inputs, reducing chemicals, creating healthy ecosystems. But right now, policy is not really focused on that. And there's just a lack of infrastructure. And we need the capital to help with that infrastructure and the research and development piece. And that will produce markets. Markets are developing. They come and go. But I'm working on a project right now as a farmer-led co-op of perennial grains, which is a really exciting place to be as research comes out with more, I suggest perennial rye. Maybe in a decade, perennial wheat we'll see, and perennial oats or whatever. But perennial grains in general, we are the very first farmer-led co-op that is ready to commercialize perennial grains and continuous living crops. And it's really an exciting place. But we're all doing this like on grants, and we're developing the markets, we're developing the supply chains, but we're a group of farmers. And really all we want to do is just grow food and fiber. It's difficult because we have to do all these other pieces as well to try to make this, what we want to see as the future of agriculture, become reality. So we just need everybody's help. I'm so glad that I'm on this today. If anyone's listening, to be a part of this exciting ecosystem, and wherever you're at, whether a volunteer or a funder or a consumer, everyone has a part in this because we are human beings. We need clean water. We need nutritional food. We need housing, and we need energy. And so We are a part of an agricultural system, whether we think we are or we aren't. Every single one of us on planet Earth is. And so if anything, if it's bringing awareness to what agriculture is and the potential agriculture has for good, I hope I'm doing that right now.
What a beautiful, beautiful sentiment to start bringing our conversation to a close. This idea that we need everyone, and whether that's someone coming and doing an internship on your farm or someone buying your incredible wool from Jóia Sleep, shopping and getting there some bedding that can envelop them in the warmth and beauty that you've created. I guess, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners as we come to a close?
Yes, I can be pretty verbose on it, but I just want to, again, bring attention to advocacy. And that is another actionable thing that anyone can do. And, right now we sit in the confines of, we have a Congress and we have legislators, but policy matters. And it matters to each and every one of us because we are eaters and because we use energy and because we need clean water and, those things that I pointed out. But those people that are in our Congress today are decision makers. And what I've noticed over the course of my, short time span as a farmer, 15 years, is that this constant pulse is necessary, a constant pulse of messaging. This is what's important to me. Over and over and over again, they do listen. And I think a lot of people have given up on the political landscape. We are their constituents and they have to listen to us. And the louder that we are, the more noisier that we are, the more often we bug them, like a fly or a mosquito or something, thinking in terms of this constant pulse of messaging of, hey, this is what's important to me. I want clean water. I want clean water. I want clean water. I want chemicals out of our food. I want natural fibers. Whatever it may be, just to keep that constant pulse of messaging to our legislators is important. They do listen. Those changes do happen, whether minutely, slowly, or quickly, they do happen. And so I just want to give everyone agency. You all have agency to make change. It might not be overnight, but when it comes to agriculture, nothing is overnight. It takes time to make changes to soil and changes to, soil health and our water quality. It is all important. So that would be my final thing, my final heart to express. Please vote, please contact legislators, tell them what's important to you over and over again.
Well, Wendy, it's been such a joy to step into your world for just a moment on this podcast. Thank you so much for the hard work, and thank you for your care for life, for your care for the birds and the animals that you work with, and those beautiful perennial grains and perennial plants and trees. The world is better for your efforts, and really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. If you enjoyed this conversation and are looking to dive even deeper into the B Corp movement, you'll love our new podcast, Beyond the B, hosted by Lyft Economy's Amy Allison and me, Ryan Honeyman. Beyond the B is your insider's guide to the B Corp movement. You'll learn about the new B Corp standards shaping our community, how the B Corp movement is navigating the various tensions and challenges of growth, and how businesses like Patagonia are putting their commitments to people and planet in practice. Check out our latest episodes and free resources at lifteconomy.com/beyond. You can also subscribe to Beyond the B on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again for listening.
Hey, Next Economy Now listeners. If you haven't gathered from our podcast already, we're really passionate about helping to build a future that works for all of us. If you share that passion and are looking to deepen your practice, we want to share a few ways to connect and learn directly with the Lyft Economy team. You've likely heard of the Next Economy MBA, which we started almost 10 years ago and have trained over 800 alumni through the fundamentals of business design from a regenerative and just perspective. New this year, our Next Economy Fund will embody our values of democratically allocating resources to Next Economy entrepreneurs that are part of our alumni network. We've also launched 2 trainings that came directly out of our MBA community's desire for more in-depth skill building around 2 key topics: organizational leadership and personal life design. Next Economy Leadership is a workshop series designed to help culture leaders at purpose-driven organizations move towards full embodiment of their values. And Next Economy Living is a 6-month training designed to help everyday citizens and consumers take actionable next steps to transform their local communities to align with a future that works for all of us. You can hear about all of these offerings and other ways we're supporting the Next Economy movement at lifteconomy.com/next steps. We deeply appreciate you being a listener of our show, especially in a cultural moment when attention and community are hard to come by. We're amazed by the community of folks we get to learn alongside through these offerings and hope you'll consider joining us.